Kelly Monahan went looking for the habits of people getting the most out of AI, figuring that she could teach those habits to everyone else. What she found is that those users trust AI 64% more than they trust their own colleagues. A second study added that they're actually lonelier too. Today, we're going to get into all of that and more, including why AI might be acting like your bestie when you should be training it to be your critic.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Motivation and Nat. I'm Natalie, your host, and this is where we take hot mess to high potential. Today, I'm joined by a guest that is going to be probably one of the top people we're going to talk to in AI, future of work, all of those kind of things. And I can't wait to introduce her to everyone. So Kelly Monahan, Dr. Kelly Monahan, who is coming to us from a just set of experience in rooms I don't think many of us understand being in. And then the research that you have done in the world of AI, future to work, that encompasses everything from relationships to technology to all of those things. I'm so excited to have you here, Kelly. Let me just do a quick blurb about who you are, and then I'll pitch it to you to tell us all of the rest. But Kelly's research has been recognized and published in both applied and academic journals, including MIT Sloan Management Review and the Journal of Strategic Management. She's a published best-selling author and has been a TEDx speaker on the future of work. Her expertise on how to apply new management and talent models in knowledge-based organizations is sought after by companies around the world. In fact, we had to hold off because you were in South Korea for a bit of time. So like when we say around the world, we mean around the world. So Kelly, thank you so much for being here to dive into something that has been probably one of the strongest threads through every conversation I have, which is where the heck are things going? What is the role of data? What is AI? How does it connect? So thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how the heck you got into this world of things in the first place.
Yeah. So Natalie, it's so fun to be on your podcast and appreciate you having me. So, I'm going to go all the way back to where I'm from. So I'm from Rochester, New York. And during formative development years, I saw 45,000 people lose their job at Kodak. And oftentimes it's blamed on, well, they didn't, chase a digital camera. Kodak invented the digital camera. They just didn't have the right leadership and culture and mindset to be able to accept the new reality that was coming, that profit margins were going to shorten in order to chase digital. And so I think from a young age, that really made me think about work in a very different way because it was almost this fear-based approach throughout the city. So fast forward, I go into HR because I thought, okay, if I'm going to I want to help people keep jobs, I want to help develop people and upskill them. HR seems like the right place to do that. The problem is my very first assignment was a reduction in workforce. And that was because of robotic process automation, which I just kind of call like a baby AI. And so that really led me to get my PhD to understand how do we make better decisions about people at work? Like, how do we get this right? Because technology is never going to slow down. Technology is always going to be a disruptor. So how do we humanize that disruption? And that's really what I've spent the last 15 to 20 years studying from a PhD level. Had a great opportunity to be the first future of work researcher at Deloitte, then at Meta, and now I have my own company called Beyond the Desk, where every day I wake up and work with executives and board members of how do you humanize this moment? And to do so, we cannot lose the fact that work is all about people. Work is not about technology. Technology is a tool that helps us do our work. Work at the end of the day is about people.
I just released an episode, and that was one of the things that she said is that who will eventually be there to manage, organize, implement any of these technologies if we haven't still prioritized the people in some fashion, even if that means upskilling them to really work in this industry in a way that
right.
benefits them, the organizations, and moves us further along. So I got to ask what the history of AI truly is, because when we first met, you're like, it's been around since the 50s. And I was like, oh, let me just give myself a gut check here, because I didn't even realize. And it was one of those, okay, let's really understand what this is, because we throw the term around so loosely right now. So give us a quick history lesson in what AI is and how it's transformed over time.
Yep. So AI started being talked about, to your point, in the 1950s. It technically was 1955 when it was this accepted term that we kind of rallied around. And there was so much promise. And the number one thing that they were focused on in the 50s was, could a human detect the difference of whether or not they were talking to a computer or a human, the Turing test? And that has been the North Star for any sort of AI machine learning development, is making a computer seem and sound like a human. Like that has been the whole goal of artificial intelligence. And what's so fascinating, which most people don't realize, which is why I'm not as scared, I think, about this moment we're in right now, is we've seen these cycles. I think AI is cyclical, not linear in terms of how we think about its development. And so, as you think through, one of Herbert Simon, who won the Nobel Peace Prize back in this, I think it was the 60s or 70s, I have to look at the exact date, basically had this proclamation that AI was going to be able to do any work a human can do in 5 to 7 years, that humans would basically be obsolete. And like that was going to go all in. The gentleman who started the MIT AI Intelligence Lab said the exact same thing, and even had like a stronger of like, AI is not going to just take away jobs. It's going to be able to help us with anything we want, like washing a car. And so these were the statements. And then you fast forward to 1985, the New York Times wrote an article that said, artificial intelligence is the most absurd corporate buzzword. It's being used to everything, every corporate application use case. So this narrative of AI is going to take away our work, AI is going to do all these things that humans can do, has been a narrative since the 1950s. Now, what is different today, and what kind of broke the internet, if you will, in November 2022, is that ChatGPT AI did pass the Turing test, meaning we have a hard time now understanding whether or not we're talking to a human or an AI. Now, somewhat the funnier paradox thing about this, I think we all know when we're reading AI text now, like it's become almost so prevalent and all this AI slop that's out there. So that's why people got super excited and thought we really are on the verge of this huge breakthrough. And I don't want to minimize the moment. No doubt AI is very different than what it was in the 50s and 80s. But the way that we approach it and the way we've been thinking about it, that narrative has not changed, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think that it's a good opportunity for us to really think about when we're using the term, because my first introduction to ChatGPT was in a risk class where they said, all right, tell me a picture that you want to have AI paint for you. And so we gave them things, and what came up on the screen was nothing that any of us had actually envisioned. And the idea is, this isn't a mind reader, that there are so many variables to what you are thinking about in that moment that unless you put all of those variables into this machine and then creates things, it fills in the gaps the way that it thinks are most predictable to fill in the gaps. And ironically, when we're thinking very uniquely, it's not always to that first kind of most common answer that it might go with. And so to your point of being able to detect now when we read it, like there's certain phrases that it always uses to fill in the space. And then you're like, oh, that was written by Claude, or that was written by such and such. So the AI conversation that we seem to be having right now, I think, or that people are defaulting to, is those everyday apps, those uses, those things that are sitting kind of at our fingertips. But it is so much more embedded behind the scenes. And I know being in healthcare, I've seen this a lot, where it's already in our medical record systems, it's in our finance detection processing, it's in claims departments. What are the other purposes and uses of AI versus just a create me this or build this or write me this? Because there are so many scientific use cases for it.
Yes. I would think about AI in 3 different and distinct buckets, and they all serve a different purpose. The very first is what you just described, which is robotic process automation, machine learning, which it's a form of AI that's able to detect patterns in a data. Perfect example of this is Netflix. I mean, AI has been running since I think 2011 in Netflix, of being able to predict what is the next movie or TV show we're likely to watch. And I think it's a really great algorithm. It can't do anything else besides that one goal. And so like when you think about healthcare, if it's mining through various patient records, it is only built to do that one thing and do that one thing very well. And that to me is like actually makes me very excited about AI, because it's such a great use case of something that we as humans aren't really great at. Like we're not great at being able to go through thousands of data points and kind of come up with the aha insight. That's where machine learning, robotic process automation, that form of AI is really good at. The second form of AI is probably what most of your audience is familiar with, which is the chatbot generative AI application, where it is generating content. I mean, it's as simple as that, whether it's an email, some sort of AI post for LinkedIn, images, all that sort of thing, is you're actually creating content. It's generating images and words. The third thing, which is we're on the frontier of, and I think we're going to be talking about this a lot more if let's say I come out on your podcast next year, is going to be agentic AI or AI agents. And what that is doing is actually taking a decision and executing on your behalf. And I think that's where the workplace is really excited about AI right now in leaders. And I think that's probably where the fear is, because that is where, as we think about substitution effect, could AI do my job? RPA can't, robotic process automation can't do your job. Generative AI cannot do your job. Agentic AI can do parts of your job. And I think that's going to be the decision point, and that's where things are going to get really interesting, is where do we allow AI agents to actually execute and make decisions on our behalf? And I think that's probably $1 billion question right now.
So I'll tap this into probably something as a researcher you're super familiar with, which is reliability and validity of testing, right? And so
Sure.
when we are in those scenarios, whether it's a human or a machine, oftentimes you're having to go in and verify, yes, this operated the way I intended for it to operate, or
Sure.
this was the right thing. Do you anticipate that there will be a change in the success measures, right? Those metrics that go 95% confidence, I'm good with you moving forward. Like, are we going to be more potentially critiquing of the machine decisioning from the agentic side than we would of a human? So like, well, 95% of the time they get it right. We're good. Go ahead and move along, versus no, the machine's going to have to be at 99.9 before we give it the A-OK.
Yeah, I think that's going to depend on use case, task, and industry. And so I don't know about you, like let's just take a traffic controller. 95% is not good enough. And as you think about that job, like that needs to be 99.99% accuracy. You think of healthcare and a lot of our regulated industries, it is built on accuracy. And so the problem with agentic AI and just the way it works and operates is you're never going to get to 100% certainty. And even getting to 99% is going to be pretty difficult. And not to say that humans are flawless, but with enough experience and repetition, humans do really well in these positions. Now, here's my concern is one, there was a new report that was recently released by Glean. The researcher's Rebecca Hines, and she found that the majority of people are not double checking AI's work. And so we are already having this offload of, okay, I don't have time to double check it. I assume it's right. And we're shipping products and content that has potential AI errors in it. So I think one, we don't have the right discipline or governance framework in place for humans. And then the second thing that makes me nervous is you need to keep humans in the loop for those regulated industries. And if we remove the expertise and start deploying AI systems to replace entry-level jobs, which is kind of a big topic right now, how do people have that experience? And then how do we know when AI is right? And so I think these are really big, thorny issues that as much of there's this promise of great, AI is going to create efficiency, help us do things differently. There's also these huge ethical concerns of what ifs, and to your point, if something goes wrong, who is accountable and who's to blame? These are all things that we haven't really sorted out yet.
Well, and that's where that governance piece comes in. And I'm sure as someone who's been in those rooms where you're part of the standing up at the governance conversation, right? What is our data governance? What is our change control governance? What are all of these components? It's the one thing I see with a lot of clients is just straight lacking. They may have a leadership council, but they don't have a group of experts. Do we have enough experts in the industry to actually start to formulate these kind of governance structures that will be necessary as we more rapidly and in a larger scope accept some of these kind of new systems and developments?
Yeah, I think this is the pro and con of democratizing expertise and intelligence, which at the end of the day is what AI is doing. It's allowing us to gain expertise and have intelligence without necessarily putting in, 10 years of education, right? Which I did. Someone could probably learn the same organizational theories that I did in a matter of days and not 10 years. The problem is, though, that creates almost a false sense of confidence and a false sense of expertise. And the thing with expertise is it's not just knowing the material, it's knowing the material in a different context or applying it in a novel situation. And that is what I get concerned about is people think they may be AI experts or they may be, experts in their domain. But until something goes wrong, until that actually requires a novel application, that's where things are beginning to fall apart. And so we have as humans to remember, we still have to develop expertise. You cannot outsource your critical thinking or even your expertise to AI. It's meant to level you up. And that's where I get concerned with. I see a lot of people saying, hey, this is great. I don't have to think about this anymore. And that sort of language and frame makes me really nervous because, to your point, the governance and accountability will end up on a human. Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, you cannot blame an amoral machine. You're going to either have to blame the creators of the machine or the user of the machine. And most likely it's going to come down to user. And so that's why, for me, it's all about maintaining expertise and intelligence and not getting confused just because we can acquire a tidbit of knowledge pretty quickly.
And we already know accountability is one of the hardest places in leadership and in management just because of how quickly it can shift over time. Like, what level do you hold accountable? How do you hold it accountable? And now adding in this whole, well, should you have known better? Or what education did you need? Was it available? What are some of the things that, no matter what place in the industry you're in, from a top executive to an entry-level person, that we can go potentially either seek or offer education on certain areas to start to build those skills and competencies up if we were starting from scratch? Like, what's a starting point, some of those resources we could think of?
So the number one thing that I would say is your mindset before even getting to the resources, and that is making sure that you view AI as a thought partner, not decision maker. And that's my concern is, there's a lot of research coming out. The more that we actually offload decision-making to AI, the less confident we become in our own ability to make decisions. So no matter what tool, resource, start with a mindset that is, you are not learning how to use AI to make decisions on your behalf. You are using AI and how to be a thought partner. Stay in the driver's seat, keep AI in the passenger seat. And so where to get started? Number one, remain expert in your domain. And so if you're a marketer, as an example, don't stop learning marketing principles and concepts and consumer behavior. Like, stay on top of your field and discipline has actually become more critical than ever before. Because without that knowledge, you're going to be unable to determine whether or not AI is telling the truth, or providing a good recommendation. The second skill set that I tell everyone is you need to have a basic understanding of statistics. All AI runs on is statistics. And so it becomes quickly dismystified and it becomes less of a black box when you realize how probabilities work and how AI is getting the answer that it's giving to you. So having a command of statistics is going to be really helpful. And then third, what I tell people is you have to figure out, are you going to go build your own AI agent or are you going to actually go buy an AI tool? And really beginning to have a better understanding of the AI tooling ecosystem. So again, if you're a marketer, do you buy the AI, feature within a HubSpot or, CRM system? Do you buy an AI feature that allows more customization within your email platforms? Those are the type of decisions. Or do you build your own and kind of retain that IP? That's going to be decisions everyone has to make. So 1, remain an expert in your domain. 2, understand statistics. And then 3, figure out, should I be building this tool myself or should I actually be buying this?
And, I think the remaining an expert in your domain, it's funny, I just signed up for 2 courses today through one of my healthcare leadership things that were on AI. They were just like, this is, AI and robotic surgery and AI here. But I think the key point is it's more trying to set us up for what are the signs to look for, or what are the things that at least we should have on our periphery if they're not yet in our space, because our patients may ask about it. And along with this, we've got a whole set of community and population that are now using those accessible systems, but they're also now questioning a lot of stuff. They're like, do you use AI? Like, what is that recorder doing with what I tell you in this doctor's office visit? And so physicians in my industry have been getting questions. What is ambient dictation AI? Does it take word for word what I'm saying and put it in my medical record that now another doc is going to have access to? So I think there's also that consequences piece, right? Of like, how do you even translate some of this over to someone who is taking information at face value? And now I'm the expert and having to re-describe something that they think they understand to what it actually is.
100%. I think that's spot on. It's one of the things, like, you go back, like, from a personal use case, so you can understand when a doctor has an AI, to your point, ambient AI in the background transcribing for them. Think of something to me, it's like personal use cases are actually way more fun to help illuminate what AI can do. And for me, like, I love being in the kitchen when I'm home and cooking. And AI has been a great help for me to take pictures as I'm cooking and find new recipes and critique me and give me feedback. And I'm being able to understand and see AI's capabilities this way before I even think about it in a work case. And I think the same is true, like from a medical perspective. If you're a patient and you're really not sure anything about AI, well, go have fun with it in your personal life so you can begin to understand why that doctor may be using that. And then I think to your point, it's going to be up to the experts to disclose when AI is in use, how it's being used, and how it will inform their decision making. And making that distinction between what is a human lane and AI lane is going to be critical.
So you've mentioned a couple times about the industries that, one, we've historically seen this being used in, two, where it's really set right now to have huge impact in some of the research analytical spaces, things like that. But set us straight on what are the industries right now that this is having the biggest impact on, or as you rub that crystal ball, we can anticipate exploration of having impact in different areas.
Yeah, I think what's so ironic is the most disrupted industry right now is technology. So the one thing that we have figured out AI is really good at, and especially agentic AI, is coding. And so when you think about like what is the product of your industry in tech, the product is code. It's being able to ship products online through code. And so it's been fascinating to see. We told everyone to go get a STEM degree. We told everyone to go become a coder. And that's actually now the one thing that AI is probably most likely going to disrupt the fastest and quickest in terms of potentially eroding some of the job opportunity in that industry. So I see tech as an interesting place for us to observe and watch because they are creating the technologies that are then disrupting the way that they operate. As I think through other industries, if your job, one, is done on a computer, contains repeat transactional duties, that's a potential for AI disruption. Like AI is really good, as I said, at detecting patterns, data, transaction. If you spend all your time writing emails, that's a problem. Like that's kind of a watch out. And so a lot of the research is showing is if you have a computer-based job, you can expect about 30 to 35% of your day job to be disrupted and taken over the next several years by agentic AI. AI will be able to even potentially even attend meetings on your behalf to take those notes. And so that is the frame I'd be thinking about of, does my job contain a lot of emails, contain a lot of writing, contain a lot of computer work? That's ripe for disruption. Where if I had that crystal ball and said, I've got a 12-year-old nephew, what should he think about from a career opportunity? Here's what I tell him. One, either go into the skilled trades because the physical world jobs are becoming much more in demand and are having much higher wages, and there's not enough supply to do them. And so, and by the way, those people tend to have much more meaningful work because it's very obvious the impact that their labor has on the world. So skilled trades, I think, are going to make a comeback because it's much less susceptible to AI automation. And or whatever you do, excel in your domain and ensure that you are understanding and using AI to do your job differently. And so those are the two things I'm always telling them. Either like go learn how to build something with AI and think of yourself as a builder and having this opportunity, or go think about doing something different apart from the computer and adding value back to society. Like I think those are probably the crossroads we're at. It's going to be hard to maintain the level of knowledge work and business jobs that we have today. We're just not going to have that same magnitude or that same need in 3 to 5 years from now.
I'm curious, and this wasn't on our prep or anything, so apologies for my
for it.
Out of the way questions I'm throwing. But do you feel that when we're utilizing it, whether informed or not informed, what the role of bias is in the conversation? Because I know we have a lot of discussion about my perception. So I walk into a room,
Sure.
You can factually describe the room, but you also can get a vibe and a feel and kind of see who's coming in and out. So are there ways that we can use it to actually remove our personal bias that might be clouding our judgment, but also things we might want to be considered might be adding, because depending on how we act or interact, we could be reinforcing that unconscious bias over time?
Yes. So I think the best way to think about AI is it's ultimately a mirror of you and it amplifies who you are. And so like I posted this funny thing on LinkedIn the other day where like I was just kind of having fun with my AI agent I had built and just like started after every command, started ending it with LFG, just like for fun. And then all of a sudden it started writing back to me and like giving me the answer or my output and then ending it with LFG Kelly. And I'm like, whoa, like I didn't tell you to do that. Like, and it just re-illuminated to me that it is simply a mirror. My AI and how I interact with it is going to look very different than your AI and how you're interacting with it. And so 2 things to consider there. One, it's a mirror. So if you're already biased, it is likely amplifying your biases, not taking it away. And two, to also remember all these AI tools are built on the collective intelligence of humanity that exists on the World Wide Web. And so that all that intelligence isn't always good. And as humans, we are biased. And so to me, if you want to use AI to actually course correct bias, which is implicit to all of us, it is to use it as a coaching and feedback tool of, in this email, where am I not being inclusive? Where do I have a blind spot? And after spending a year chatting back and forth, it has a pretty good representation of who you are and how you think. And so asking for feedback, everything you know about me, where do you see biases show up in my writing or how I approach this? And so to me, that's really the only way to use it. If not, I actually worry it becomes more of an amplifier of our existing biases.
It makes me think it's a great way to get critical feedback without having to get it from someone around you. My husband told me the other day, he goes, I asked ChatGPT to tell me about your podcast. And I was like, I don't want to see it. Don't tell me about it. But now I'm sitting here going, I should ask one of them, look at this podcast. What is it missing?
Yes.
What does it not do well? What could it optimize further? So a few of those just place someone else's viewpoint potentially onto that to crack that mirror a little bit, other than saying, you've done a great job on this one again, Natalie, which I find it usually does.
Oh, Natalie, you have got to train that out of AI, because this is my concern is, and this is I think really important for your audience to understand if they don't understand this already, is AI is not your bestie. AI does not have your best interest in mind. It is created by for-profit companies who also gave us social media and have learned how to keep us engaged on a device and tool to the end of monetization and money making. So what people don't realize is what we don't have right now yet is ads. Ads are coming to AI. Monetization efforts, and in the spirit of personalization and individualization, you will be getting push products to go purchase and buy. And so we have to remember that with these AI tools is, even though it's acting as if it's your bestie and it has your best interest in mind, it's keep going and how else can I help? That is really not the sentiment of what these tools are about.
So similar to when, and not to call them out, but Google, you could sponsor and place your stuff higher up in the search piece, that may now be what we see as someone that's worked with one of these apps is paying to have their favored response land first in the what's provided to you when you ask that question. Oh, that's interesting. I know we saw it, people have talked about it, and I think it was on a bunch of the Super Bowl commercials, right, where they were just like, oh, no ads for you and this app, this is why you want it. The component of, and I want to talk keep this balance of good and bad, right? So we see a lot of things that are highlighted of, I can't believe AI did that. AI hallucinations. My favorite one is in law, right? Give me a case law that does this, and then it creates a case law. And there's a video that I just saw of someone arguing it in front of a circuit court judge. And they called him out and they're like, there is no such case as that. Would you like to go again? And just so there are pieces that I think, maybe this is a question about what are the prompts, to your point of the bias, that actually set us up to have a higher chance of a hallucination. And it's just trying to keep us happy, like the commercials where it's like, hey, Jean, you're doing great. And hey, Samantha, this, I can certainly help you with that. Getting that best friend piece out of there.
Yes. So I think if you, the higher chance of hallucination is the less context you give it and the more generic you are with your prompt. Most people still don't realize you should be giving it a persona, a context of so let's use your podcast as an example, and you want feedback. If you just say to ChatGPT or Claude, I want feedback on my podcast, it's going to give you a very generic set. Instead, if you say, hey, I want you to mimic my average listener. I'm just making this up. I have no idea who your average listener is, but let's say it's a 35 to 45-year-old, young female professional who's mid-career looking for career advice, navigating new technology. How would they perceive this podcast? And specifically, I want you to focus on areas of improvement and opportunities to better engage and meet their needs. That's going to give you a much better feedback that's positioned to what you actually probably should receive than just saying, hey, give me feedback on my podcast. Those are two very different altitudes and prompts. And I think this becomes really important because as we talk about the evolution of AI, as we move from machine learning to chatbot to actually agentic AI will then be making decisions on your behalf. So let's just say you eventually set up an agentic AI that helps promote your podcast and puts us on various social media and helps write those posts for you. if you are just, again, giving it very generic prompts, the likelihood for it to even hallucinate on an episode is very high. And so again, it's making sure that we are training AI. It is, again, I tell my, I've already trained it, and I had to tell about 5 times, you are not here to flatter me. I do not care what you think about me. You are here to level me up. You are here to make me a higher performer. And even better, if you throw in, you are here to make me better connect with humans in the real world. How do I connect? And those are things that like most people I don't think have in their prompt. And we actually, you got to be careful because over time you become addicted to that flattery.
Well, and that's a perfect lead in. It was for later on, but we're going to hit it now. In the
Yeah.
Upwork Research Institute work that you mentioned when we first met, which was this idea
Yeah.
that people actually like trust and respond better to their AI,
Yes.
colleague than they do their actual human colleague. Tell us a little bit about that research, what it indicated, and what, again, how this reinforces a little bit about what you just talked about.
Yeah, so this was fascinating. So like 2 years ago, I sent off to design a study where the whole goal was to understand how what we were calling AI super users, the top 25% of people using AI every day, multiple times a day to actually gain productivity. What were their habits? Like what were they doing? Because the whole goal of the study was then to figure out how do we scale that and teach that across other organizations. Now, the problem is that's not what the study ended up finding. The study ended up finding that those super users were 64% more likely to trust AI more than their human colleagues, and 67% of them were more likely to want to work with AI than their human colleagues. And now Oracle just came out with a study a couple weeks ago to further confirm my study's findings and added one additional dimension to show that these AI super users are also having higher loneliness scores. And so here's a question we have to ask ourselves. We have enough digital devices to keep us disconnected from one another. Like we have already have that in spades. AI could be used to do the same thing because it's actually isolating us from our colleagues. I'm no longer picking up the phone asking for, hey, can you review this, paper for me? I'm asking my AI agent to review my paper and proof it and provide details. And that I miss this point of human connection as a result of that. And so to me, human connection is going to have to be intentionally designed. And if we are not careful, the more that we use a tool that, again, mirrors us, sounds like us, does not challenge us, does not ask us to compromise, we lose touch of what reality actually is when it comes to human relating. And the last thing I'll say is, as we think about this for organizations, most organizations today want creativity, want innovation. And it goes back to something you said very early on in this podcast. That does not happen through linear, rational, agreeable thinking. Creativity and innovation actually comes from sometimes disagreement, comes from working in the trenches and actually connecting deeply on a nonlinear topic. And that's what I worry about is if we continue to chase AI through the lens of efficiency, we lose something very human in that process. And it's not just loneliness. It's also losing a sense of innovation and creativity and meaning in what we do.
So in a sense, by expanding our world and what we bring into it, we start to narrow ourselves
It's
in
a paradox.
some form or fashion.
Absolutely.
So what are some other research elements that you've done in this space? Because this has been your focus as a PhD,
Yes.
as in some of these things. The point is kind of looking at some of that predictability. What are some of the other really interesting research-based findings that you have come up with that are adjacent to AI or tech in general about kind of our work industry and who we are kind of maturing to be as the generations continue forward?
Yeah, I think the through line that in all my research is we have really important decisions to make right now around how we're going to use AI. And let me explain that. When I was at Upwork, I got the opportunity to actually see, which is a freelancer platform. It's a global marketplace. And so one of my main studies for the last 3 years was understanding how is AI disrupting work itself at the task level. And we had great data to study this. The one thing that we saw over and over again is AI was very disruptive to what we called low value work, not in terms of the value someone was providing, but value in terms of the money someone was willing to pay for that type of skill. So, for an example, let's take project management. Like how much is someone willing to pay to have someone come on as a freelancer for project management work? And we saw that changing pretty quickly. So if it came again to those routine, transactional, low value tasks, a user would rather use AI than hire a human. It just was actually filled with less friction. But what that actually meant is in those categories of work, people were actually engaging in higher complex work. And so the request coming in from the client was no longer, hey, create an email campaign for me. It was identify and segment my, user population, create personalized emails, and then help me analyze the results afterwards. And so the ask became bigger and more complex. And that meant people's wages actually went up because that project was worth more. And so that's the tension point we're in. Now, the problem is you look at what I'm again, like low value transactional tasks, those within a full-time employee market tend to be your junior employees. I grew up in consulting. You don't become a partner right off the bat. You become a partner by making PowerPoint decks and tweaking things until midnight and changing page numbers. Like you absorb the information and work by doing the menial tasks that no one else wanted to do. What happens now when consulting and partners say, you know what, actually, I'm going to give that to an AI agent. They're going to fix my PowerPoint. What do we do? How do we make sure that we have that early career entry points into the labor market? That is what I'm concerned about. And I think that's what all my research is pointing me to is leaders have to make a decision. Do you still have the apprenticeship program? Do you still have the internship program? Do you still have 100 early career development professionals you hire every quarter? My concern is we're seeing that begin to shrink. And then how do we get people back into the realm of these high complex projects where work is going? That to me is one of the great paradoxes of AI. It's actually making human work more valuable while eroding the way that we get that valuable work.
Yeah, so the on-ramp is getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yes.
So it's like you're eventually, especially as we hit the retirement cliffs that are coming up and folks are leaving the industry, who bridges that gap into that management? And I think of things like customer service, which we saw a huge push into sending this out to foreign countries to manage that, and because it was cheaper labor. And now we may not even have that because it may be cheaper to do an agent. But then who manages those teams that eventually are needed if they've never done the work directly because an agent has done it the whole time? So that's a really fascinating gap that could build.
100%. And one more thing I would just add to that is, as you use like the customer service example too, coming from the tech industry, I think what I worry about is that people building the tech and are very influential right now in how this is going are tech people. They're software engineers. Their world does not evolve around social capital. The way that their world works is around writing more efficient, better code. Most other industries work very differently. Like take hospitality as an example. That does not run on code. That runs on social capital. And I think that's the one thing AI agents can never do is actually replace trust and influence in our ability to have a relationship and just work differently because of that and almost outside the system. And so I think that's something we have to watch for too is how do we build social capital? Again, if that on-ramp is getting shorter. And to your point, we have outsourced. Now at the point of automation, all that social capital and implicit knowledge of the industry is gone. And at what point does that become a diminishing return?
Well, and I know, and this is probably something a lot of experts have landed in, is there's been this call to have experts come forward and help train some of these agents or to, fact check what they know. And I laughed because I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and apply for one just to see. Maybe I'll get in. I've got this extensive federal background, and compliance and risk. And my interview was an AI interview for 15 minutes. She did a very nice job at summarizing what I gave her, but they didn't pick me. And I'm like, if you don't want the most recent person that did this work in the federal government, I'm like, now I'm interested in who is being selected to help train some of these things. Are they very similar to each other, or are you putting some of those people that are like the weird outliers, right? Like I do this so differently than everyone else, but I'm still an expert in this industry because I don't know who maybe someone did read my actual summary, but if it was an AI agent that actually picked who goes forward, like where, and maybe this is a question of, if we touched on it a few times, but where should those human spot checks kind of sit in the process? Like how far do you go before you go, oh, at step 2, we might have to go back and rework now?
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating question. And again, it's going to vary so much depending on the process. So let's take like the most common one, which you just described, is in the talent acquisition recruiting process. AI is now writing job descriptions, screening candidates, oftentimes then making a recommendation to the hiring manager who they should hire. And oftentimes there is no human in the loop until the actual decision-making process. And you talk about biases and all the things that could get in the way, and there's no human oversight in many cases. Same thing's happening in performance management in many organizations. AI agents are essentially writing performance reviews, and I think probably pretty soon going to be getting ready to deliver performance reviews because that's something as humans we're not really that great at anyways, and most managers don't like to do it. But to your point, these are consequential decisions to both expertise, to have, individual thriving, ability to have income and all these other things. So when should humans stay in the loop? I think they should be constantly in the loop. And so let's just take, again, hiring. Humans should be writing the job description and making sure that the requirements are inclusive, that really match the moment and the need. And they are not generic, because I see a lot of generic job descriptions out there. Humans should, let's say you do have an AI screener, they should then be having a quality check like we do in customer service of watch 3 to 5 of those for an audit. Like, is that going the way that it should? Is there any sort of bias that it's detecting? Is it doing what it should be doing? And then absolutely, I'm a huge proponent, no matter what the task is, even if it's sending out emails, a human should be the final decision maker, a final reviewer. And to me, it's like so obvious why we should be keeping humans in the loop. And people think, well, then now we're not having the efficiency gains that we hoped. But you have to maintain quality, and you can do faster, higher quality work by having a human in the loop.
Yeah, really good reminder for ourselves too, for what we decide to shift off
Sure,
or not
100%.
shift off. Like, I'm all about email templates, but I'm going to read every email before it goes out when I use that template, because I probably want to shift something in there. So,
absolutely.
You mentioned a Nobel Prize winner in the 60s, 70s kind of time frame.
Yeah.
In 2024, there were 2 more that were very specific to how they were utilizing AI, I think in physics and something else. What are some of the amazing innovations that we may not realize have happened in these last 10 years or so, or 5 years, that were driven by having access to some of these advancements in this area?
I think healthcare and pharmaceuticals is by and large probably the most promising. I work with a pharmaceutical company, and they have taken what would take 7 to 10 years for drug discovery down to 2 to 3 years. Like, that's getting us closer to finding cures for cancer, cures for diseases, increasing longevity. As we start thinking about more personalized and individualized medicine solutions, like that is where I think AI is such a phenomenal use case. And again, it's not replacing scientists, it's actually leveling them up and allowing them to do things that are really important to humanity faster. Like, the faster we can discover a cure to cancer, the better that is for every human being on this planet. So that really excites me as I think through AI, again, leveling up a domain. The second area I get excited about AI, and this is going to be a little bit more in the physical world, is being able to do really dangerous jobs. As we think about now drones, and I work a lot too, in the mining industry, being able to send robots. I was, you mentioned Korea. I was in Korea, and so we actually saw some of the demos of these robots that are going into really dangerous situations where a human should not be. Someone should be putting their life in danger to make money. And so that to me is also an exciting opportunity of not just the chat GPT applications, but actually in the physical world where we can deploy agentic AI and able to keep people safe, and now we've got people sitting behind the scenes, and actually directing a drone or a robot, being able to do something that's even more skilled, and then they were remaining safe. So those are 2 examples that I wake up and think, wow, this is so cool. We're going to be able to live in a world. And I think the third thing more broadly is the democratization of education. And so you think about the U2 lead singer famously said, your zip code should not determine your quality of life, but that is the reality for many of us. And so truly beginning to democratize access to education, figuring out how to pay off your student loans faster, how to become more financially savvy and save money, just making everyday life easier for the average person also really excites me of what AI is doing, because that levels us all up.
So I'm going to touch on probably one of the hottest topics in this area that's not necessarily the app-based, but is the idea of the data centers. And so what we've talked about is how prevalent all of this has really been for a long period of time. And one of the major shifts now being that we do have it accessible more. Why are data centers now all of a sudden popping up? Have they been around for a while? We just haven't seen them. They were underground. We know that there's a cooling process. Is there a chance that we may not need as many as we see if we actually kind of stem, the explosion of this and we pull it back into a manageable level? Has any of that popped up in some of the research or the work that you've done?
Yeah, I think the unfortunate part with any technology advancement, and we saw this in the Industrial Revolution, is it does tend to come to an expense, oftentimes at people first, as well as planet, and it takes us a little bit to figure out how do we regulate this in a way that does not cause harm. I think through, again, growing up in Rochester, like all the pollution that was happening, the chemical spills that were happening, with film development until laws and regulation were in place. Same thing is because we're so early on with this explosion of AI of where we are today with it. Data centers right now are necessary to power all the tools and all the innovation we just talked about. The problem is they do so at a tremendous energy cost. And the way in which we've developed these AI models, like we're not at quantum computing, we're at an earlier generation of that. And so it's continuing to take tremendous amounts of energy. And quantum computing may take tremendous amounts of energy too. Like we need an energy breakthrough more than anything else. So what I'm seeing in the research and, what's going to be interesting is one, we have to be careful because a lot of these data centers are going into rural American communities because they're cheaper and there's land there. And that's really disruptive to those communities and how they're functioning. And so like their quality of life is going down. And I think we have to recognize that and figure out how do we protect that. The second thing is, what's interesting is NVIDIA is proposing actually installing mini data centers on people's houses and having people pay for them. And that becomes less of these massive data centers and more we're all sharing the burden, if you will. I think the question becomes is what if you don't use AI? What if that's not something you want? What if that's not something you want to necessarily contribute in that regard? I think all of these decisions are going to come to a breaking point at some point because we don't have an infinite amount of energy. It's a limited resource. And we know climate change. Like I live in Florida, and so I can tell you firsthand how much the climate is changing. And so the question becomes, as we have increasing number of natural disasters and energy companies have to make decisions of where they route energy, what happens when data centers get prioritized over residential communities? Like all this stuff I think is going to play out, having that crystal ball over the next several years. And that's okay. Like we have to have some of these decisions play out so we can bring the right regulations and laws in place to make this as least harmful as possible.
Tell you what, I think if we get a mini data center in our house, that would be the decision to go get solar. So
yes, agree.
We can cross-populate. But I mean, to that point, China, I think, has just floated building underground data centers to allow the water to cool. And then it's like, well, what happens when the water heats up because the water's cooling that?
The ocean.
And
You're
is that going to impact our fishing and all of those kind of things? So I appreciate that because this has been when I talk to local folks in our area. We're about an hour and a half outside of Pittsburgh, right? They've gone through the natural gas where they're like boom bust. They've gone through, the coal industry. Now they're like, I've got this huge thing that's potentially coming down the road for me. I don't know how my farm will manage, with the water population. So all of those adjacent components still coming into play, and maybe it affects our insurance rates. It affects all those kind of things. So just having that ongoing kind of knowledge in general. And then as we've talked about this whole time, the specialized pieces. But Kelly, you're more than just an AI expert. I want to make sure to give you a platform to talk about what does Beyond the Desk do? What services do you offer? People that are listening going, oh my God, I definitely want to engage with her in some fashion. Tell us all about that so folks know how to reach out.
Thank you so much. So Beyond the Desk was born from this idea that I was hearing leaders more and more tell me behind closed doors, we've lost the plot of what work is about. And so my co-founder and I, who's an IO psychologist and executive coach, I'm more of the researcher, leadership, team level, and she's at the individual level, have started to create methodologies and frameworks to help people navigate this time to reclaim the plot of work. I've got a book coming out this fall that actually is called Reclaim the Plot that, again, goes through the repair pathway, the plot framework to help leaders right now. These are all decisions we have to make. There's oftentimes not a win-win, and there's oftentimes not a lose-lose. It's all trade-offs and compromises. And that's why we call the company Beyond the Desk, because it's all the things that happen outside of an Excel spreadsheet, outside of the work itself, that actually I think are probably the most important decisions leaders have. So if you're a decision maker today, you are managing a team, and you are overwhelmed, you are burned out, you are confused of where the world is going, that is our expertise. We come alongside organizations and leaders to help them make better sense and reclaim the plot of what work is all about.
And I think it's really important in a world that has historically been so mission driven. And yet we have people going,
Yep.
I don't know what our real mission is
Right.
anymore. Like, are we
Sure.
really doing this? Because of the pressure that you have to make enough money to pay the people to execute the mission. So then you lose part of the, like, it's just this whole
Correct.
tangled web.
It's a flywheel. Correct.
Right.
It's like what I tell clients today is like, we're kind of caught in this chaotic flywheel. And we have to get out of that. And we have to come to a much more virtuous cycle of how do we actually, again, create value? Because if you create value, you're going to start using AI in a way that's not just efficiency, but actually meaningful. You're not going to see it as a way to automate people out of a job, but as a way to actually level people up and create new markets. And so much of this is about our mindsets, behaviors, and routines. And we've got all of those right now are very chaotic and they're actually creating a lot of harm. And so how do we get out of that and actually create the mindsets, behaviors, and routines that you feel good about? Like, we spend so much time at work. Let's feel good about what we're doing every day.
Well, and I just love the title Beyond the Desk, because I know anyone who's been in an office setting, your most impactful discussions often happen in the cafeteria, in the
Absolutely.
hallway, or in that 2-minute elevator ride. Where
Absolutely.
someone goes, oh my God, I've got you for 2 minutes. Like, let me just toss this at you. And then you're like, okay, what do I do next? So
Yes.
it is. Those are our historic disruptive moments that often bring about so much of that innovation. And now to marry it with the everyday grind of Teams meetings and board discussions and all of that kind of stuff, it's a hard balance these days with everything we have at our fingertips. So
absolutely.
This has been a fantastic conversation, Kelly. If you could wrap it up with a couple just takeaways that you'd love people to remember about the discussion, love to patch it to you just to
Yes.
end us off on those key reminders of a conversation that can be a little scary, but also really invigorating in some ways.
Yes. I would say number one of what we've mentioned and talked about is AI is a thought partner, not a decision maker. Like, stay in the driver's seat. Do not outsource your critical thinking. Stay confident, in who you are. To remember, AI is a mirror. And so it's a great application and way to get that feedback, to get that coaching, but don't make it your bestie. Don't feed into the flattery. It is there to be a mirror of who you are. And then finally, have fun in this moment. We are at an incredible moment that, yes, there's a lot of messy, thorny issues we've got to figure out, like the data centers, like the energy that we talked about, like job loss and trying to figure out how to remain employable. But there's also an incredible opportunity to rethink the way that we live and work because of AI. And that is what I want people energized with is, how do I rethink the way I live and work? How do I make life easier? How do I actually use AI so I can get back out into my community and connect more with people? That is the end goal. And if we're not using AI to stay connected and contribute back into our society, we're doing it wrong. So let's not lose the plot of what AI is all about.
Yeah, reclaim the plot.
That's right. That is right.
Another plug for the book. So I'm going to clear my cache on my apps when I'm done with this, because I think it probably has claimed a lot of memory. And I think we see that with, as you mentioned, Netflix, right? Why does it keep recommending this stuff for me? Well, clear the cache out. Let it start from scratch a little bit.
Absolutely.
Give it a new prompt and direction. So Kelly, thank you so much for joining today. For anyone that is interested in connecting with Kelly, the show notes are going to have all the information about Beyond the Desk, about the book that is coming out, the books Kelly already has available, and definitely make sure to check it out, reach out. You do keynote speaking, all of those kind of things, so you can bring Kelly to you virtually or in person. And I would love to take you up on a year from now. Where do we stand with some of this? Because I think we'll have been through a round of elections. We're going to see a lot of state, involvement on some of these things. And just that federal law governance is a big unknown
100%.
in this area that can impact us.
Let's do it.
So awesome. Well, thanks everyone for listening. We hope you will join again soon for another conversation, and we'll talk then.